We are in the studio and home of Nell Erasmus, abstract artist for many decades, and this is the 9th in a series of recorded conversations with Nell, and we are privileged today to have with us. Nell, as you know, needs very little introduction, and in the previous sessions you would by now have gained quite a bit of knowledge about Nell's philosophy, about her artworks, about her dedication, and about her lifelong quest to pursue her specific challenges in the abstract art that she engages with. But together with us in the studio today to engage and participate in the conversation with Nell in this session is Marilyn Martin. Marilyn also is someone who in the South African context and beyond hardly needs any introduction, but for the benefit of our viewers, just briefly, Marilyn, amongst her many talents and endeavours over the years, was a senior lecturer at Wits in Johannesburg, South Africa, in the architecture department. Thereafter, for quite a number of years, she was the director of the South African National Gallery. She is an art writer, art critic, and a curator of many notable exhibitions. Marilyn, thank you for being here with Nell and myself in the studio today, and I really look forward to this conversation, which will not only shed more light on Nell's work and introduce and create awareness of her work with viewers, but it is also something that I look forward to personally, as I am in the presence of two masters. It's really wonderful to be here.
Oh, thank you for that introduction, Lizelle. Nell, what can I say? It is such a privilege and a pleasure to be here in your home and in your studio to talk to you and to be in the company of Lizelle. Isn't this much better than Zoom? So thank you for the opportunity.
Such a pleasure to have you both here.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
You've had wonderful and enlightening conversations with a diverse number of people, and they've touched on so many aspects of your long and interesting life and work. I see our engagement as one of distillation and a focus on abstract art and abstraction. Now, abstract expression has been with humankind since we first made a mark. But there's still a lot of skepticism about what abstract art is and how it is made. So I also see this as an opportunity for us to explore and to encourage people to look differently, and for people to learn more about abstract art and abstraction, but through the lens of your work and through the lens of art history. And to help us along the way, I will quote you and I will quote other writers and artists on the subject. So, being the pedantic art historian, I would like to start with terminology. I always refer to abstract art, abstraction, rather than non-figurative, non-objective art, unless, of course, an artist would like for his or her work to be referred to in that way. You described yourself as an abstract painter, so may I assume that you agree with that term?
Yes, I think you should call me abstract. Although it isn't pure abstraction, at least it was at a certain time, when Clement Greenberg made beautiful remarks, it was pure abstraction. But I have since changed. I've added a bit of nature to it because it comes from nature. Nature is my inspiration because it is based on abstraction. But the proliferation of nature being so prolific, it hides the abstraction, and I would love people to see the beauty of its abstraction.
Yes. Picasso once said that why does everybody want to know how a bird sings? You know, and somebody can explain it to us, but this is always the idea to encourage people to look at the work of art in its own right and not as a representation of something else. And that, in a way, answers my next question. When Mill Huntley wrote that your paintings are never abstract. Now, again, as an art historian, I'm wary of using the words always or never when discussing art. So when you said that you would argue that your paintings are never abstract, no. Mostly abstract.
What did Mo say in the beginning? You said
She said Nell Erasmus would argue that her paintings are never abstract, that the source of all her paintings is in the real world.
I would rather say is never purely abstract.
Purely abstract. And I think this answers a lot of questions, never purely abstract.
And is that perhaps, if I may ask Nell and yourself, is that perhaps also something that is enlightening, that could be enlightening to viewers, this fine distinction in terminology, viewers that are not so familiar with abstract works, is to have that understanding that there is a difference between pure abstraction and abstraction, not complete abstraction.
With a reference to life, if
Yes.
I may chip in.
With a reference to life, like in many of your works.
To three-dimensional
Yes.
life, yeah.
Indeed, there is a distinction, I would say, abstracted from something, or not having any reference whatsoever in anything that in the real world, as a kind of that doesn't apply to your work necessarily, but in general, if one wants to simplify an approach.
But you see, then I would like to straight away ask, what is then the content of it if it has no reference to our visual world? What would be the content? There are many possible abilities, but there should be content. Otherwise, it is decoration.
The content would be the work itself, because the content can be of a spiritual nature. For example, a Kandinsky. There in his abstract paintings, there's no reference, there's no source or point of departure in the real world. But I challenge anybody to stand before Kandinsky and not feel something. So then we enter into the world of spirituality, into the world of the metaphysical, that the artwork, without, and maybe particularly without reference to the real world, can transcend the viewer's approach and lift us into somewhere else.
May I say that in light of the conversation that is taking place now, that one of the most striking aspects of Nell's work for me as a viewer, and not necessarily as someone with academic knowledge of art or any deeper knowledge of art history, is that there is an immediate striking spiritual quality about Nell's work.
What would you define it as?
Yes, and I think that is without even knowing what the subject matter is. We will talk about your titles later on, but I had a conversation with Lloyd Pollack out of the blue. He called me, the art critic, day before yesterday, and he said, "What are you up to?" I said, "I'm going to talk to Nell." And he's very knowledgeable about art. He immediately said, her work is not always accessible but it's beautifully structured and constructed. And that's a huge compliment, because you also don't want a work of art to be in your face and to tell you exactly immediately what it is. You're not going to spend much more time with it.
No, you must take part in it.
Yes.
And it must beg you to please understand me, if I can put it like that.
I'm so interested in your quotation when you said, "I am happiest when heart and head seem to walk a tightrope on the canvas, where feeling and thought seem to be in tension. For me, these two sometimes manage to contain me and my shadow, my heart and my head, all the opposites in brief." Now, has abstraction, rather than a more overt figuration as a practice, enabled you to explore that tension and also perhaps to reconcile head and heart, or intuition and intellect?
You know, abstraction is stripping, is taking away. And because you are working with more simplified, or with simpler and with fewer things, I think it is more possible to come to that interface of the two, because they are with us all the time, and sometimes they fight, and sometimes they float together. But I think abstraction helps. It makes them come to the surface, I think.
Marilyn spoke about tension. What role does tension play, both in your works, in art and in life?
You know, I think you put your finger on the very essence, because tension arrives in life, everywhere, anytime. More, less, medium, or balanced. Balance very rare, but tension is life. And I've tried, as you all know now, to paint energy, to paint flow, to paint movement. And now, where did we start? I'm now getting involved in movement.
It's good, it's good. The tension, yes.
Yes, because the object or the image or the memory of the object must in itself have tension, must have life. And so must it have tension with its surrounding atmosphere. This atmosphere in painting is the background. And you cannot paint motion or movement unless the remains of that object or that object interchanges with its surroundings, because it moves in the surroundings. Well, when I realized that, then everything changed. Then the background became an active partner, and it could be formed into shape and line. Very difficult, but it's possible. And then it became another tool for the artist to use. You didn't have now only planes and lines, and you had space. That's after a long, long time.
So that is one of the secrets of movement, of depicting.
Yeah, because I was obsessed with movement. I wanted to paint movement. That's what took a lifetime.
What also probably took a lifetime was the psychological content of a work of art. Most good works of art do have that psychological content, because when you put the paint on the brush and you put that on the canvas, or you draw, that's a part of yourself going onto the canvas. Your emotions, your spirituality, your inner credo. And that then becomes the product, the artwork. So how have you managed to maintain this over the decades? putting yourself onto the canvas like that, and your psychology, your inner core, a part of you as your life.
And so consistently.
Yes.
That the same.
You know, I think it depends on the need. If the need is big enough, you continue. If that slackens, you slacken, but eventually it catches up with you. And I was passionate about trying to paint movement, because the whole world is full of movement. We live in such a dynamic world, there's never a still moment. And I've observed light, it keeps changing with us, with all the movement every time the light's different. And observing nature and life and light, there you had the ingredients. And I wanted to keep something of that, show it on a flat surface. Sculpture does it automatically, after, I suppose, Henry Moore, or before. But painting, no, because the background used to be a dead, still thing, ready to receive whatever is happening to it. And it's not so. And that's when I woke up to the fact that the human object also had better wake up. And we are dependent on space around us, air, a lot. And when the object was broken, but not completely taken away, then flow was there. But now to paint the flow, that was a problem.
Now to paint the flow,
that was so
you
difficult.
need a medium. And you've worked in more densely constructed oil and acrylic paintings on hardboard and canvas. You've used fields of colour, you've used mixed media on paper. At what point do you decide which medium is the most appropriate one for what you've just explained, what you would like to achieve, what you want to put onto that flat surface? The paper or the canvas or the board, the ink, the acrylic, oil, mixed media.
Oh, Marilyn, it is so many-folded, so many facets, and one does it sort of automatically, because also size has an importance. So if you have a canvas the right size, I think you'll go for it. But paper is one of my preferred things. If I have a canvas that size and a piece of paper that size, I'm fond of preparing the paper. It's usually Fabriano, a good quality, with a coat of gesso, or PVA, and then work on top of that. That's a solid, yet somehow absorbent ground. And it's just rough enough. It's not very rough, but it grips. And paper is so friendly. It's so expecting and absorbing, even with a gesso, more so than a canvas. I suppose you can prepare a canvas until it is that texture, but I mean, how you do that, I don't know, but it can be done. But I'm very happy with the paper, and you can cut it the size you like.
So in terms of support, canvas or paper or board, paper is one of your favourite supports. Is that the correct
It's
word?
easy, it's at hand, it's there, it's waiting, please use me, sort of thing. And then, of course, even for storage, it's easier.
Unfortunately, there are lots of people who still regard works on paper as somehow inferior to canvas.
Yeah,
If you speak to the general collector, you ask a person, would you like a painting, or would you on canvas, or would you like a drawing or a graphic or a painting on paper? They will say, no, we want the painting, we want a real painting.
A real painting.
Because somehow, if it's on paper, and I so agree with you, because I think there are artists who have worked on paper, on canvas, who really should have stuck with paper, because that was a stronger medium. With you, it's different because you've explored everything running consistently and concurrently as you worked your way through.
But you know, I also agree with those who want a real painting because it's so tough. It really withstands a lot of bad handling.
Yes.
And it can be so easily restored. Paper can be very well restored too. But a canvas is sturdy.
What I like about your works on paper, of course, I love your paintings as well, whether in oil or acrylic, but the fragility almost of the concepts that you put onto the artwork, or that you put into the artwork, in a certain sense also resonates with the fragility of the paper. I don't know if I'm expressing it well, but there is something very delicate about many of your concepts, and to put it on something delicate such as paper somehow resonates with me.
Yes, paper is just a sympathetic thing. Crease me and I will be stretched.
Yes. And while we're on this track, and you putting down your thoughts and your feelings and struggling to get the movement and the flow and nature into the work, the titles in your works are very important. For me, they open a door to what is happening on the canvas, and they encourage one to linger a little longer, because what on the surface might appear as completely abstract, you read the title and you think, oh, okay, well, maybe I should have another look, or look a little deeper to find out why the artist has given this work this title. What do they mean to you, and what relationship do you think your titles have to the viewer?
I think a title as such can be important, or should be, because you offer the viewer, because you want to make contact. So you offer the viewer a possible angle, but he needn't even read it. That's fine. In any case, he's going to look at it with what he brings to the picture. He's going to find that. But you can just shift it for him if he likes to. So I think it is important. It is not without meaning. You tell them at least that. And otherwise, I'm very happy when people suggest titles.
Oh.
You know, it's a matter of, yes, you take it, or you can say, yeah, but no, not this time, or so. And I had a friend, Barry Hough, who was very good at titles. When he said something, it was always dead right. I think I mentioned it to you before. When I started with germination, it was started with the simplest, the bean that breaks open 2 lobes. And this one was flowering already. And he just looked at it and he said, that's an embryo listening.
Embryo listening.
And Nadine Gordimer was also good when I showed with Reinhold. She would sometimes give titles. I know it was of the swimmers, and one she called Glide, and the other, but anyway, she was good at that. And I'm very, very happy when people come with titles. A series that Jessie, I made a series of a drawing that she made as a child. It was an exceptional drawing. She says she was a little bit older, but she was this high. And it was a crab holding a heart, and from the heart was coming a kite. Well, that concept was just too good. And I kept it for years, and then one day started painting. They didn't need titles. They were there, all of it. So I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't remember.
9. I've had the privilege of spending time with Nell in her studio when she was contemplating titles and, just looking at work and reviewing it again and looking at titles. And you said something that touched me, because I think that honors your viewer. You said that titles are important depending on the context, because it is just that little something that could give a viewer an entry into the work. And that concept of having the ability to enter a work, because now I've got a little hook to just hold on to, and then allow me to explore the work, I found valuable.
One hopes so, yeah.
Yes, and there's such poetry in many of your titles.
Thank you.
That is
nice.
an experience and a pleasure in itself.
We're all different, and when one is a mature viewer of art, you would find it easier to say, I'm adrift at sea, I don't mind, I don't need anchors, let me dive into this work and swim until I see something that resonates with me. For others of us, and this is particularly relevant in my view, because it is so that your work is of a quality that is not always so accessible to, let's say, the younger viewer. So your titles make it just that little bit easier to say, this is an abstract work, I'm going to dive into this work, I'm going to dive into the unknown, but at least I've got this little hook to hang on to, and it will help me to search for something that's familiar.
Yeah, you've got a point there. Yeah.
I think it was a problem with so much of the painterly abstraction of the 70s and 80s that not only here but across the world, that they were untitled. So people think, well, what is this? And my child can do better. All those cliches about abstract art, and just the title does open something for us.
And you remember Paul Klee, he had title evenings, and he invited friends to give titles. And one title, it was, one of the friends said, oh, that one, Soirée snob chez la princesse, the snob evening at the princesses. And he had that title. So yes, I think it's very, very nice if friends give titles.
Instead of having a title and then making a painting to fit the title.
Yeah.
Again, you have this participation between the viewer and the artist and the artwork. Sometimes I wonder if the art is really this, or if the art is the dynamic interaction between this object, the object that is portrayed, if there's an object, the artist, the viewer, the various perceptions that we bring to. So art for me is almost in the mix, not necessarily in the matter. The fact that you invite your viewers, your friends, but the viewers, to participate in the naming of the artwork, I find very endearing, and I also find it very useful from the viewer's point of view, because that means that the art is really in the space between us. The actual artwork is not just this which is on the canvas or on the board.
No, you were right. It's hopefully what comes from
this
it.
dynamic interaction between.
Yeah. That's a very nice way of putting it, of course.
And as you said, we all bring our lives, our past, our present, our baggage, whatever you want to call it, to the work of art, and that's why people can so easily say, oh, I don't like this, or oh, I love it, and one doesn't always have you can't always explain why you love it or not love it so much. Sometimes you can, but not always. Now, can we go a little bit into art history?
With pleasure.
Because what fascinates me, you've described the movement and what you wanted to do. I just want to go a little bit deeper about how you got there through art history. And I'd like to go back to your first conversation with Lizelle and Frank, and to the beginnings of abstraction in Western Europe. of course, we talk about Western Europe, but Africa and the rest of the world have their own stories. This is not the subject for today, but abstraction, it didn't come out of Europe. It came out of Europe in a certain way, but it's part of human creativity in every part of the world. So, just broadly speaking, there are two sources of abstraction in the 20th century. The one that was the more geometric, what turned out in the 60s to be the hard-edged painting, and the other that was the more painterly and the lyrical abstraction. And I see in your oeuvre and evolution, the reconciliation, the bringing together of the geometric and the painterly side of 20th century abstraction. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I absolutely love mixing hard edge with soft. One of these, it's this one, I think. The freshness of drawing, because it's the keeping of black and white, and it's fresh. And the more you mix opposites, and they still work, because that's life too, the happier I am. And also, I'm thinking of during the horses, there's a very sort of abstracted horse-like shape, and the space around it is sort of constructed with little bits of color, but the line of the color, little shape, takes your mind that way, and that line may pick it up. If it's like this or if it's like that, it will cast it away. So you can play with the space, shaping it, moving it around a bit. I hope it's clear enough, but at least I was trying to do it.
When you left university and you pursued art as a career, you had many questions. And I know Marilyn is curious to know, and so am I, whether you have found answers to some of the questions. What were those questions, and have you found answers? Because thinking about it, you have had a lifelong quest spanning 7 decades and more of pursuing those questions and trying to find answers.
If Marilyn will allow it, we can come back to that.
Well, I think it's a very good point, because Lizelle, that moment when Nell left without with questions and few answers, we will come back to that. But what you've said links directly to, once again, to go back to Cubism, because that was such an important point of finding the answers when Nell got to Europe and she could actually see the original works. Because we were talking earlier on today, whether it's digital now or whether it was reproductions in books, everything is flat. When you look at it on a piece of paper, when you see the real thing, you see the subtleties and the complexities of brushwork or the application of paint. So we go back to Cubism, because that's something that I'm fascinated about with Braque and Picasso, and that analytical Cubism of the 1909 to 11, where they deconstructed the human figure or the still life or whatever it is that they were painting, in order to get to its essence. And essence is a word that also applies to you. So the deconstruction wasn't for its own sake. It was in an effort to arrive at the essence of the object, a human being or an apple or whatever. So they deconstructed it and dismembered it, as it were, and then reconstructed it from different points of view, so that we saw the object from different points of view simultaneously. So it was a new way of looking at how to paint, how to put that thing on a flat surface.
It was still very on flat surface,
Yes.
yeah, because it was different angles put on top of, but not much in between. Not much of a link between that and that. Really.
Yeah, no, I think it was more of an interpenetration of space and form. Picasso said Cubism was about form. Braque said Cubism was about space. And I think that's why this calm Frenchman and this exuberant Spaniard could work so well together. And what you and many other artists could then take a step further. Because like Mondrian, like Malevich, and others, they did not feel, and you did not feel, that Cubism took their revolution to its logical conclusion. Abstraction on the one hand, or movement on the other hand, because it was very static. Now, did when the static cubist grid became the futurist lines of force, did that inspire you in any way to find your way of making things move?
I looked at the few. I first started with the cubists and couldn't get further. Then I looked at the Italian futurists and thought, maybe I've got a role model here, but I didn't have. So then I knew I was alone.
Now, the problem with the futurists was that they were trying to capture on canvas sequential movement. And that, of course, can only be captured in film, of course, which was available at the time and that everybody started exploring. But your idea of movement was, again, about the essence rather than any kind of sequence.
Yeah, that is that concept. That sequential movement I call staccato because it's quick and it's rapid like that, and that's where it stopped. And then to make flow was the next big problem. I've got stacks of drawings there, and paintings, all trying to get some flow. It's all with little bits of little marks. Didn't work. I don't even know with which exact one picture it worked, because it really was with lamplight that the lamp's globe would throw its own shape, not diffused but shape-wise, onto the background. And then from there you got it. Then you got to now improvise and bring more of those and bring them back onto the thing.
And of course, the series would be very important
in
that quest of yours, using the same subject matter. And of course, this is what Cézanne and Monet and many other artists had chosen to paint a series to try and capture or represent or feel or share or whatever it is that their individual intentions were.
Yes, you make one big sheet, all of the same person's back, and out of the 6, there's one that works.
So it's not unusual to take the same object or the same subject matter and do it again and again and again.
Yes, yes.
Until you find that you are succeeding in what it is that you're trying to achieve.
And even then it's a gift.
Now, while we're talking about movement, is there a difference between trying to capture movement or flow, which I think is a wider concept than movement, and perhaps you can just talk about the two, and the third concept called speed. Speed was never an interest. You never wanted to portray speed.
Drawing is a speedy way of doing, because you normally don't labor a drawing. It's a quick thing. I'm thinking of René Hug, who speaks about vitesse, speed. When he speaks about speed, he thinks of the speed you have in drawing, that it is such an immediate putting down on a surface, your feeling, your appreciation of that line, that flow, it comes. And I agree with him. I'm very fond of drawing.
All of us who talk about abstraction, and you who practice it, Nell, you love to quote Maurice Denis when he said in 1914,
Yes, I do.
remember that a painting, before being a battle horse, a nude woman, or an anecdote, is essentially a surface covered with colours assembled in a certain order. Why do you love that quotation so much?
It's so full of promise. The world's the end. I don't know. You could go on with it.
Yes. So we jumped over to Europe, but it was relevant to us as South Africans, broadening our perspectives in one way or another through engagement, travel with the bigger world. Would you agree that Walter Battus was an important precursor of a different kind of art in South Africa, both as an artist, as a teacher? I ask you that because he painted an abstract painting in 1937, the same time that the architects were busy in the John Moffat building, under a pseudonym, but throughout his life he would paint abstract paintings.
He was truly inventive, and I think he was really always ahead of most people. I really respect him.
And I think what he also did, because perhaps one of the other absences in South African abstract painting is a lack of a theoretical treatise. The architects wrote a manifesto, but very few people wrote about the ideas, the theories of South African. There are libraries full of theories about abstract art in other parts of the world, but not here. So we didn't really have a theoretical base.
I don't think Battus ever wrote anything, did he?
No, but through his teaching.
Oh, through his teaching.
I think
yes.
that yes, he would convey that, and through his external examination in the different universities that he would convey it. And then coming a little bit closer to the present, Ricky Burnett, who in my view is one of our finest younger generation
I agree with you.
abstract painters. He's just yes, he wrote, and that's going back to the 1970s and early 80s in South Africa, a lot of abstract painters in this country almost painted themselves out of the paintings and painted the veneer of abstraction rather than the guts of it, unquote. And you mentioned the problems of decoration, if it only becomes a decorative surface. Do you agree that this happened when abstraction finally became fashionable in South Africa?
I think so. He is so right, because so much of it, as we said before, become extra decoration. Ask those people what's their content. You don't get a reply. It's not possible.
Nan has often said that focus, dedication and focus and concentration is necessary to get to those depths. So that perhaps is something that is relevant in this context.
You mentioned the most important thing, and that is concentration and focus. Without that, abstract art is decoration, because it's not easy. You're not busy with familiar things, you're busy with abstract things.
But of course it also became a formula for some people when it became fashionable. Some really fine, figurative artists turned to abstraction. And then when abstraction fell out of favor in the late 1980s and 1990s, fine abstract artists turned to figuration. And I think this is one of the reasons why I admire you, Nell, and also an artist like Judith Mason, to oppose very opposite kind of forms of expression. But you worked consistently according to your inner volition and that which you wanted to achieve. So you didn't change from one thing to the next thing. You didn't follow the bandwagon. You didn't follow the fashion.
Yeah, I guess it was also Judy's need to do what she did.
Yes.
She had to do it.
Because when the 90s came, and now, first of all, there was postmodern, and postmodernism was anti-modern, so whatever was abstract and in terms of architecture as well, went out the window, and it had to, the work had to have a narrative, and it had to have all sorts, it had to be figurative. And in South Africa, because we were on the brink of a whole new world, a whole new democratic world in this country, it was seen that only figuration could explore the political relevant aspects of what was happening in the country. You continued along your own way, as did Ricky Burnett, Jenny Stadler, Jill Trappler. There were many artists who carried on with working the way that they had to, as you put it. Like Judy had to be a figurative artist, and you had to follow your direction and your quest and your search.
In other words, Nell stuck to her guns.
Yes, she stuck to her gun, she stuck to her inner conviction. Of course, the art pendulum keeps swinging. And from about 2008, there's been a renewed interest amongst young South African artists to work in an abstract way. And there's also been a renewed interest in showing abstract art. There was, for example, the exhibition Thinking, Feeling, Head, Heart at the New Church Museum in 2014, and then Abstraction South African Art from the 50s to the 70s, which Frank and Lizelle curated at Welgemeent in Cape Town. And at the National Gallery, Hayden Proud curated an exhibition in the same year called Assessing Abstraction. So there's more and more interest, but there are not very many commercial galleries that are showing an interest in modern art. All the emphasis is on what is contemporary, and particularly on what is being produced on the rest of the African continent, which is important, but we also have to keep our history in our minds and in our eyes. Would you say that SMAC Gallery, Stellenbosch Modern and Contemporary Gallery, Bailon Sundry's Gallery, is an exception in this regard?
A big exception. Bailon and his gallery was responsible for 5 beautiful years of my life. It's roughly between 2007 and 2012. He really has a work, he has power, and he works like 20 people at the same time. And he would go on, and he wouldn't get tired. I often said to him, "We need you. Don't go on like that." And he had 2 beautiful assistants at the time. It was Jean Butler and Marilyn van Zyl, and those 2 worked very, very beautifully together. And well, he knew how to make one feel at home, and he really spoilt one. He does that, I think, with his artists. But then, when of course I didn't sell that well, I understand, because galleries must make money, and again, people didn't really want what I wanted, what I did. So he told me he was going to go more for the African market, and I understand that. And then I thought, let me have a last go at the auction houses. I didn't feel like it, but let me, because now. So then I did, and it was a beautiful failure. absolutely fantastic. So that when I said that to Bailon, he was very, very, very unhappy and very annoyed. And he certainly didn't respond to any of my emails or whatever way I tried to contact him. So it came to an end there, but I'm very sorry he's not part of this. But there you are, that's life, so we carry on.
We do not, like in other countries, there are not many artists that have written a manifesto for, for abstract art generally or for specific artists. But that made me think, and I looked it up now while you were talking about what Nell, I think, in one paragraph probably gets to the heart of what you are doing. And if I may,
Yes.
I'd like to read. Nell says, all right, for me, and I am speaking of my own work, a gradual dismemberment has taken place over several decades. Deconstruction is the word used more often now. Motion and movement, speed, tension, rhythm, and other invisible forces have gradually replaced the object and the personal, with their limitations. The action, the motion, the energy is what needs to be communicated. It has become the content. The horse, bird, or seed have become symbols of energy and energies. The field is wide and open and endless.
I think, Nell, if you would like to respond to that, or perhaps that is such a powerful moment for us to conclude.
I just want to thank you both immensely for what you have brought to the surface this morning. Thank you ever so much.
And I want to thank you for this opportunity, both you and Lizelle, and you, Jessie, who's filming all this and making it so easy for us, but also in such a professional manner. It was wonderful. Nell and I spent time together this morning before we started recording, and it was just wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, all three of you. Thank you so much.